Hello, my name's Justin and I'm an Ielts instructor from Ielts Boost. So today I'm going to talk in more detail about the structure of the Ielts test, what's required, and also how to prepare for it. At the end there's a little quiz which you can take in order to consolidate on your knowledge of the Ielts test. Ielts is an acronym. It stands for the International English Language Testing System, and it's commonly required by many universities and countries around the world for immigration purposes.
The Ielts test lasts for approximately 11 to 14 minutes, and it really depends on how long you are willing to talk for and how much you're willing to show your English skills during the test. The entire test of 4 skills lasts around 2.5 hours. And the speaking test is the shortest part of the test, but by no means the easiest. The speaking test lasts between 11 to 14 minutes, and it just consists of an oral interview between the examiner and one candidate. There are 3 parts to the test. We have first part 1, which is more of like the introduction and interview. Part 2, also known as the individual long turn. And finally, part 3, which is a 2-way discussion. Some YouTube channels talk about an Ielts part 0. What do they mean by part 0? Part 0 is simply introducing yourself to the examiner, asking for your name and your identification. While it's not an assessed part of the test, IELTS examiners are still human. It's still important to give a good impression and to be polite to the examiner, because a lot of the descriptors require a certain level of human judgment and subjective choice regarding your scores and which descriptors that your English level is suitable for. Part 1. Part 1 consists of a series of personal questions. Remember to answer the questions about you and not about the broader society or maybe more intellectual questions in general. How does Part 1 work? You will get 3 key topics. The first topic will always be questions about either your work or studies, your home, your hometown, where you live, and you'll be asked around 4 to 6 questions on each topic. Following this first set of questions, the examiner will move on to 2 more topic areas. For example, common topic areas include family, free time, sports, shopping, etc. However, the examiner may then ask you more questions on a more unusual topic area. Some unusual topic areas including ice cream, dreams. Remember, in part 1, you can't ask the examiner to rephrase the question, but you can always ask them to repeat the question if you didn't hear it clearly. For part 1, it's not good to give extremely short responses with 1 or 2 words. Remember to expand slightly, but it's not necessary to give such full in-depth responses as you would in an academic conversation, which is required in part 3. So in part 1, maybe you could give a few sentences, 2 to 4 sentences for each answer. And remember, it's about you. So talk naturally and be honest about yourself. Remember, you're trying to demonstrate your English language proficiency. That's why you shouldn't give such short answers for part 1. Let's talk a little bit more about the history of Ielts. Ielts was originally designed as an English language test to establish whether students have the necessary speaking skills to take part in higher education in a Western or English-speaking country. At the end of university, of your higher education, one of the most important formal assessments is a speaking test, which consists of an interview between some professors and yourself, regarding some research, some in-depth research that you've performed, which is produced in a document also known as a dissertation. This oral assessment exam at the end of your higher education is one of the most important assessments, and it's also known as the viva. In essence, part 2 is a simulation. It's designed to assess whether students have the necessary presentation skills necessary to conduct a viva speaking assessment at the end of their higher education of university. Part 2 is also called the long turn. You are given a cue card and you have to talk for 1 to 2 minutes on this given topic. you cannot ask to change the topic, but you do have 1 minute available to you to make some notes on a scrap piece of paper. After your part 2, the examiner may ask you 1 or 2 follow-up questions based on your presentation. However, it's not necessary to give detailed responses to these follow-up questions, as you haven't started part 3, the two-way discussion part of the speaking test. For part 2, the cue cards always follow a similar structure. And in this way, your presentation can also follow a very similar structure for every single response. And this is one of the strategies that we will teach you as part of our Ielts Boost course. Remember, you do not have to talk for the full 2 minutes, but it is advisable to try. You do not have to use all the prompts on the card. It only says you should talk about these prompts. It doesn't say you must. But again, you should try to cover all the points as part of your answer. Let's move on to the hardest and most difficult part of the Ielts speaking test, which is part 3. In part 3, you'll be asked to talk about more academic subjects and more theoretical questions by nature. You may be asked to give some personal opinions, but in general, you need to answer the questions from a more general perspective. For example, talking about society as a whole. By nature, the questions in part 3 could be more abstract, focusing on economic or social issues. Ielts Part 3 was initially designed to assess whether students have the particular English language ability and academic speaking skills to take part in academic conversations. Such speaking skills include functions like comparing and contrasting, giving and defending your opinions, justifying your opinions, or making predictions about the future. Part 3 takes around 4 to 5 minutes. You may receive around 4 to 5 questions. The examiner's role is to support you and to try to really narrow down the band scale descriptors to find out exactly where your level lies within them. This is why they may try to get you to expand and elaborate on your answers. The topic for part 2 and part 3 will be the same, so the questions will be related to the topic, but you cannot predict and plan for the questions in part 3. This is because the questions are generated based on your English level itself, and you could also be asked questions based on generic skills, like comparing and contrasting, talking about advantages and disadvantages, giving opinions. In this way, the examiner will create new questions for each individual candidate. If you don't understand the way a question has been phrased, or you don't understand a particular piece of vocabulary, you may ask the examiner to rephrase the question and to explain the meaning of certain vocabulary items. You could also ask them to repeat the question again if you don't understand. In part 3, it is very important that you expand on your answers and really show off and give the examiner a really strong indication of what your true level of English ability is. Although the questions are academic in nature, in its essence, the Ielts speaking test is a semi-formal speaking test. This means that some words like idiomatic language and slang, which may not be used in very formal situations, are included in the band descriptors and can increase and improve your score. There are 4 criteria that are used to assess the score. Each criteria has a band scale and a range of descriptors that are subjectively chosen to match your English level. These 4 criteria are fluency and coherence, pronunciation, grammatical range and resource, and finally lexical resource, also known as vocabulary. Universities around the world typically want a band score of 5.5 to 7, which allows you to enter their university without hindrance, without taking a pre-English course prior to starting. And remember, your score is based on 4 criteria: fluency and coherence, lexical resource, grammatical range and accuracy, and pronunciation. And it's based on the descriptors that are written within each band scale. Afterwards, after the 4 scores are received for each criteria, you will get an average for the speaking test, which is then rounded up or rounded down to the nearest band scale to give you your overall speaking band score. Thank you for listening. That is the IELTS speaking test explained in detail. The tests are designed to cover the full range of ability of English use from a band score starting from 1 to 9.